Hi everyone, welcome to NEWTech. My name's Miles and thanks very much for watching. Today I'll be showing you how to do true engraving using Fusion 360. So let's go. Before we jump into Fusion 360, there's just some basics that I want to cover so we get some greater success with the engrave tool. The very first thing that we need to consider is what tool we're going to be creating this with. And here I have a 90-degree vbit tool. Now this one is super handy, and this is the one that I rely on most often. You can get different angles such as this one here. This is a 120-degree vbit and you can see that the angles differ. And you can also get like a 70-degree, which makes a lot deeper grooves as well. There's a whole lot of different angles that are available. But this is the one that you want to start off with to create most of your artworks with. It's the most versatile. The 90-degree vbit, it's really easy to tell it's a 90-degree because it actually creates a right angle if it's laid down on a table. And you can see there that that's a 90-degree. Now Fusion 360 does realize that this is it works off a 45-degree angle vbit because it actually just works from the center point outwards. I'll show you how to set that up in a second. The second thing is your artworks that you're going to be creating in Fusion 360. So I've got an example of this is an example of a vector line or a spline or a line that you would usually use in Fusion 360 or get imported from a DXF file or SVG. So you're going to create your artworks, but when you're creating your artworks, you need to consider the size of the bit that you're going to be creating with. Now, as you can see here, that there is only a certain size diameter of 22 mil for this bit from one side to the other side. And the reason why you've got to take that into account before you start designing is that none of your lines should ever be greater than the width of your vbit tool, unless that you want it to be. And I'm going to show you why that you need to know this and some issues that you can account for when you don't follow these rules. So here is a simple I shape, and what Fusion 360 is going to do is going to use that vbit tool to dive down into your line work, push down and then carve along. And as you can see that each side joins or meets that vbit quite well, and it doesn't reach the outsides of that 22 mil. However, if we have a bit that is larger, so that means that the vbit tool can fall through and that it's not going to be able to reach each side successfully. So what's going to happen here is that Fusion 360 will then just fall into like similar to a trace. So it's going to still use the inside of the part if you want it to, and it's going to go in and just touch one side and then carve around. The issue with that is that in the center of your part, you'll find that there's like a little bit of an island or a raised part, and quite often that you don't want that. So it's really important that when you're creating your artworks that you know how big your vbit is to start with. The last bit that I really like about Fusion 360 is more of the three-dimensional carving that you can get out of it. So here I have an organic shape, the shape of a leaf. Now I love doing this, and this is one of my most favorite things to do on Fusion 360 because it looks so good. Now what happens is that this piece will dive in, and as you can see that I've made this shape a little bit too big for this demonstration. So I've actually gone ahead and created a 3D printed part. So what's going to happen, Fusion 360 will go into the shape of the leaf, and as you can see it meets both sides, but as that diameter changes on the leaf, the groove will actually get a lot more shallow, and as it comes to the end it will flick up and create this really cool little shape. And I'm going to show you that in Fusion 360. So let's go. All right guys, in Fusion 360 we're going to first set up our stock that we're going to be creating on our engrave tool on. So let's go ahead and create my stock that I've got, which is going to be 300 by 300 mil. Okay, I'm going to extrude that by 17 mil. 17 mil ply that I'll be using for this tutorial. And then we're going to start doing our sketch on the top plane of my surface here. it's important that you only use the top part because that's where the engrave tool needs to meet. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing my engraving up here. Okay, I'm going to do just some basic geometry at the top to get started. So there's a rectangle, and I'm actually going to bring up my shortcut and then go fillet, whoops, fillet, and then just fillet these edges and go okay. And then I'm going to put an offset in there as well. And let's say that this offset was for about, let's say -8 to go on the inside. Maybe something a bit thinner, maybe 5. Okay, that looks good. All right, so inside here, I'm going to put some circles. Now, just remember that your circles can't be any greater than the diameter of your vbit tool that you're using. Otherwise, it's going to have issues with cutting them. So there's a simple one there. I'm actually going to put one over here, and I'll show you what I mean by creating one that's larger than the diameter of the vbit tool that you've done. So I'll do a 30 mil there. I'll also pop another couple over here. So I'll do a 20 mil with an inner circle that is, let's say 15 mil. Okay, well, let's do it. We'll go an engraved circle there. We'll do another one like that, but we'll start at 20 mil, and we'll actually do the circle on the outer part, which will be 30. We'll do another circle here, and I'm going to put this one put a rectangle on this one. The rectangle, I'll start from the inner point. That'll be 20 by 20. Snap onto the contour of the circle there, and then this one here will be a dual circle. So this is 20, and then the circle here will be another 20. Okay, underneath here, I'm going to do a bit of a pattern with the circles to show you kind of what we'll pick up with in patterns. So this one here will be another circle, another circle. Okay, so next one, I'm actually going to put some organic shapes to show you quickly what the organic shapes. I'm going to be using the point spline tool to create this, the leaf shape. This is one of my favorite shapes to engrave. The idea is to try and use as minimal points as possible to create a really lovely curve there. You can use the select tool to kind of come in here and alter those, but I'm pretty happy with that shape as it is. Okay, one thing that I'm keeping in mind is that that is the diameter of the 20 mil, and that kind of looks very similar here. I could come in here and inspect it and just see what that was, 22 mil. So it looks like it could have a little bit of issues with diving in here, but we'll have a look anyway. Over here, let's do some another organic shape. Let's just do a really random shape to see kind of what it picks up and what it allows you to do. I'll just click around. Looks like a bit like a fern leaf or something. And then the very last thing that I'm going to use as an example is actually putting some text in. So over here, let's type in my name, which is Miles. Whoops. The text that I want to show you is actually downloaded from one of those free online websites. Now, when you download those free online fonts, it's really important that you take into account what the use of it is. So this is only for a personal use font, so I wouldn't be able to use this for something that I would want to sell later on. Let's go 15 size and then drop that there. I'm going to also put in another version of my name just to show you the differences there. Go ahead and click, but this one's going to be all in caps, and we're going to use, I think it's Toma. Let's go T, there we are. And I'm going to make this a bold font, size 15 as well. And drop that in there. Okay, but before I exit out of my sketch, there's one thing that I want to do quickly is just right click and explode my text so that those lines are really, they're much easier to use, those lines, once they're in the vector file instead of just the text. So I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to show you two different types. So this one I'm going to leave as a sketch, and the one underneath I'm actually going to do an extrusion version instead. So go ahead and copy that over now. Oops. Let's try the other select, which is the window selection. Okay, and let's go okay. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to leave this as the sketch tool, and I'm going to start extruding some of these, and I'm going to show you the difference. If you just leave it as a sketch, it can work totally fine, but there's some pieces will be definitely not what you wanted. So I'll show you quickly what the difference is. So I'm going to go through and just extrude some of these. So I'm going to do that. This is the part that I wanted extruded. Now this one, actually I'm going to do this kind of beak look. This one I want all three. The outside there. Now with our little pattern here, I'll try and do something that the computer would find it hard to generate from what I had selected before. Let's go here. Oh, just for fun, let's leave these little islands in the middle. Okay, just missed a couple of things there. That looks pretty good. Okay, this shape, and jump into my text as well. You can see that there's some lines crossing there, so I'm just going to make sure I've selected everything that I want. Okay, and I'll also jump down here and do this, and the very last thing is my outline. Okay, so I think I've selected everything I wanted here, and I'm going to say, now it doesn't really matter what you cut into your object by, because we're just going to be taking off the top surface anyway. You can make this all the way through, or you can just make it like 1 mil. It doesn't matter too much because the engrave tool's not looking for the depth from here. We're just looking at that part. Okay, so let me turn that sketch back on at the top, and I want to show you the differences. So at the moment, you can see that the Fusion 360 will kind of select whatever, especially when it comes to the pattern here, or these overlapping circles, or these ones, it will kind of select what it wants to do. Rather in contrast, I've selected specific things down here. So let's jump across to our manufacture screen, and let's see what we can do to set this up. So in our setup, I'm going to go ahead, and this is my box point down here. Now, just a quick little hint, if this wasn't your x-axis and you wanted to flip it over, there's two parts of the arrows that you can click. You can either click the outer part, which is the head, and that will flip it to the other side, or you can even click the bottom of that axis and then choose the axis that you want your X on, and then it will change it. But you can see it jumps from point to point, so then we can just come back down here and select. But I actually wanted it initially the other way, so let me just go ahead and change that back the way I wanted to, and then the stop point just here. Okay, this is the other important part of the tutorial that I want to tell you about, is the stock top offset. Now, I always set this to 0 because I'm going straight onto a finished surface. That means I'm not going to be sanding, and I need to make sure that my engraving purely works off the surface of what I have selected when I go to use the CNC machine. So I'm going to set that as 0. Now, if you wanted to sand it back and you're pretty good at getting your depth okay, you might want to leave that there as 1, but I suggest turn that off and go to 0, and then click OK. Now over here in the 2D menu, we'll drop down, we'll see that there's an engrave selection. We're going to go ahead and set up our tool. Now, another little quick hint, if you have the tool already set up in another file, you could open that in the background, have it in another tab. Now, the beauty about that, it'll actually show it up here in your documents, and it'll have the project underneath with the tools that you've used. You can go ahead, select those tools, then you have them ready for this project without having to set them up. But let's jump in and see how we set up a vbit tool. So the first thing we do under the cutter tab, we're going to go down and choose the chamfer. Where is it? Chamfer. mil. There we are. Now I've only got 2 flutes on this, and this is where the tricky part starts to happen. So I might work backwards in a way. So I know that the diameter of my bit is 6 mil. I know that the tip is going to be 0 because it's going to be a sharp point. There's some ones that we don't have to worry too much about. Let's say the body length was 44, the shoulder length 30, that's fine. I might keep that as is. Now it's a 45 degree, but the diameter of this was 22. Okay, so I might just bring this down a little bit more. And say it's 30. And 22. Okay, so I'm pretty good with the look of that for the moment. You can see that it has that 90 degree angle here, even though that I've put it as a 45 degree, because Fusion 360 takes it off this central axis and measures from that 45 degree angle there. So just remember, when you're putting into Fusion 360, halve your angle and then put the halved angle into the taper angle. Okay, from there I'm going to pop in a holder. So a holder that is very similar to what I use already is this one here. That's my 1.5 kilowatt fan cooled motor from China. The feeds and speeds, my speed is 24,000. And my cutting feed rate, I'm going to be a bit more conservative and just put it at 700 for the moment. And then the post processor, I'm going to disable that. Click OK, OK again, and then you can see that those values come across. Okay, here we come to the fun part, is the contour selection. So I'm going to start up here and do my contour. You can see that I'm only selecting the contours that are laying on the surface, and you'll see that I do the same down here. I'm going to come across and, oh, that's interesting. Doing a bit of a triangle there. Okay, it doesn't really matter. It's pretty good with recognizing what parts that you want to do, as long as you do. If you do one single contour, it will usually do the whole. If you do two, it will do between those two lines. Now let's do this pattern. I'm really quite excited to see what's going to come out of this pattern, because it doesn't really know what it wants to do, but oh well, you're going to take the journey with me. Okay, there's my leaf, there's my crazy abstract piece of organic lines, and here's my name. Okay. You can see that that name, whoops, I forgot a little bit there. You see that name has really tiny little bits. We'll see about that detail in a second. Okay, I'm going to do two different engrave toolpaths. One that does this one, another one that does the other one. So down here we have the bottom height. Now, and this is really important to take note of. Now, if I change the top height, so this is actually saying that it's minus 10.45 mil from the top. Now it has calculated this value from the tool that I selected. So we already know that my tool was 22 mil wide, but we know that the depth of it, so from the point up until the top of that, it can only go down. It was 11 mil. So what Fusion does is that it goes that amount plus a little bit less, just to be in a safe zone. So you can go, it does 10.45 mil, so it doesn't hit the sides of where the vbit ends. Okay, leave the passes and the linking, and let's go okay. So let's have a quick look through, once this is finished generating, what Fusion 360 has understood and what it's decided to do. Sometimes it might come out as an error to say that I don't really understand what you asked me to do, so you'll have to go back in and choose something different. Or sometimes it can just like sit on 10% and freeze up because it's just decided to not agree with what you want to do. All right, so a couple of things that we can see straight away is that it doesn't tend to like circles that much. It's like this larger circle, But this one here, it doesn't really like. I'm not too sure why, it just randomly does that sometimes. I'm sure somebody out there will let me know why it doesn't select some circles sometimes. That was selected in my selection, but it hasn't done now. But the other shapes looks like it's selected pretty well. Okay, so let's go through and let's simulate this. I'm going to turn the model off and make sure my stock's on. Okay, so in my simulation, it's going to go around, it does that really beautiful contour. You can see that there's a V channel across there because of that end mill. Okay, it's doing these really nicely. Okay, this is where some weird things start to happen, but really cool. You can see that the circle and the square, it's just decided to go between the corners of that, and then same thing over here. It's actually handled the text pretty well, but there's some issues with the crossover of the lines. Okay, and here where I've put the 30 mil. Now this is the issue that I am talking about when you create geometry that is much larger than your tool width. So I'm just going to press pause there, but go back to where it was doing that circle. I'm going to show you really quickly that error. So as it goes in, it does a circle around that part because it's trying to meet the outer contour. But when it reaches the outer contour, it creates this little island in the middle. So that's one of the issues to keep an eye out for. And then it's gone through, done that really nicely, and absolutely smashing through those organic geometry. But this is where the magic happens with kind of when it thinks about doing it has a mind of its own. And you can see that that is really stunning, the pattern that's come out of those lines there. I had no idea that that would happen, but this is kind of what happens when you put geometry in which you don't specify exact amount. It kind of just chooses what to do. So I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to show you, turn my model back on. Now down here is where I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to actually do my geometry down here, but I'm going to turn, for this one, I'm going to be turning off my sketches so I can just do the parts that it's sunken back in, cut away from. Okay, so I'm going to keep it as that chamfer, that's fine. I'm going to deselect those ones and then go through and select my geometry. Now I'm going to take care to make sure I don't accidentally select geometry that is the bottom geometry, because you can imagine that the vbit tool will then try to reach these lines instead, and that will start to cut away more than what we need. So we don't want those ones, we just want the top contours. That's why I said that the 5 mil drop into the piece was not really a necessity to worry about. Okay, so here's some issues and some things that Fusion 360 finds really hard is when your contour lines meet at like a 0 point. That means there's not much stock in between. It really starts to get confused with what line is what, but we'll just see how this generates, just to keep an eye out for that when you start to get into some of those more complex geometry lines. Okay, all those lines are selected. Let's do this one. Now, not to forget that little line there. Okay, now I really like when you extrude it in for text. This is where it really cleans the text up and you don't get that overlap of lines. All right, and the very last piece here. All right, okay, that's everything selected, and let's go okay. So in this tutorial, I kind of just wanted to show you what you can and what you can't do, what things don't work very well, what things do work. I might have to come back in here and reselect some geometry because sometimes it doesn't like these kind of meeting points. Sometimes it does get stuck on 10%, so just bear with me. I might go back in and just change this geometry, get rid of the little diamonds there. Okay, and it really isn't liking this shape at all. Now when I go through, you can see that there is no constant contour around the outside that's allowing me to select. So one thing that Fusion 360 doesn't like very much is these like highly complex contour lines that you've drawn in Fusion 360. So for the moment, I'm just going to leave that shape there, finish off with the outer contour, and then just click OK. Generate the other one as well. Okay, so it's generated both of those paths. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm not too sure why that it's rejected this circle both times, but it's just one of those things that happens in Fusion 360 that you can't account for. A little bit frustrating, but hopefully that's an issue that will be fixed in later versions. So I'm going to export both of these paths now as one engraving because it uses the same tool, so I can just put it through. I'm going to show you what it looks like down on the machine. So I'm going to right click on both of them selected, go post process. It's just going to be saved in the engrave folder on my desktop, and I'm going to call this one, now it's really important when you name your files is that one thing that I do, and I've done since I've started doing a lot of CNC work, is label the order of my files. So I know that you can export like a tool list and what kind of programs that you've got in there, but this is one way, really simple way to keep track of what you have and what order that you need to run your toolpaths in. So this one here is number 1 toolpath, and I'm going to call it the 90 degree, so I know that it's a 90 degree vbit, and it's going to be engrave tutorial, and then I'm going to click save. Now if it was the second one, you put 2 and then change the tool bit there, or a flat end mill, whatever. So in here, one thing that my Garble doesn't like is this T1 M6 line, so I'm going to go ahead and just delete those ones and click save, and then close that down. Let's jump down to the machine and see kind of what this looks like. Hey guys, so I finished the cut on the MPCNC. I just wanted to explain too, the wood that I've actually used is a plywood made of pine, and I've just gone over the top with a heat gun just to char the top layer. It makes it easier to see the difference between the engraving and the stock itself. So there's a couple of things that worked really, really well, and things that I would say definitely avoid for the future when you're engraving. The ones that didn't work so well were these large parts where it really had to get in there and mill quite a lot out of those parts. With a little bit of stability issues in the version of the machine that I've got, it did get a little bit of a wobble when diving in quite far. If you do want to do those type of things, I suggest do it in 2 passes. So the first pass is just to get rid of a lot of that material. The second pass is to clean it up and go around it. The other thing too I suggest is that you have done a really good surface mill of your board underneath, because if this is not lying on a flat board, some of your engraving will be further in and some of it will be quite shallow. So it's really important that you get that board well surfaced before you do any engraving. So the parts that I really love about this is all that surface cutting. So this pattern, this awesome pattern that came out of those circles that I drew, this one I really love. Even the text just is absolutely beautiful, and it would work really well if you had like chopping boards or something that you want to engrave for family and friends. Probably the best outcome was the one that I used the extrusion tool and used that for my guide, because you had the entire text. This one's missing just a little bit of text, which is not too bad, but it certainly didn't come out the way that I intended. So all in all, so happy with the engrave tool. I hope that I've helped you out today. I would love it if you could hit subscribe and like on my video, and I'll see you next time. Thanks guys.